Britain was establishing its power on the west coast of the continent and then slowly moving inland. It encountered fierce resistance from the Ashanti, whose rulers had enhanced their power by controlling the inland trade routes and utilizing their superiority in arms. The Ashanti were effective bush guerrillas, and in their first test of strength against the British in 1824, the latter lost the battle as well as their commanding officer, Sir Charles Macarthy. It took more than 70 years before Britain defeated the Ashanti and imposed its rule. Both sides had hired Hausa contingents, but more than mere numbers, the British had the latest weapons too. In 1896, the Hova Kingdom in Madagascar fell to the French after a prolonged resistance. 4 years previously, the French had taken on the kingdom of Dahomey. Dahomey was ruled by men and women who were trying to mold their country into an ethnically mixed nation state. The travel writer Richard Burton had mocked King Glele for his celibate female battalions that formed an important segment of his army. The writer was more scathing about the male soldiers who, through no fault of their own, were neither well armed nor well trained. However, this same army inflicted serious losses on the approaching French column in 1892. Though they lost the battle to save their capital, the Dahomian men and women, much to the annoyance of the French, carried on guerrilla warfare in the years that followed. In revenge, the defeated women soldiers were exhibited in Paris in the late 1890s. Across the continent, in Somalia, at the turn of the century, the British faced the toughest resistance in a zone they occupied as a result of the carving up exercise conducted by the European powers at the Berlin Conference. In Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, they faced a political religious leader and poet with strong proto nationalist views and a gift for military strategy. He was the most capable guerrilla commander that Africa produced in its long battle against European intrusion. Christened the Mad Mullah by the British occupiers and mostly described as such in the British press, he became a hate figure like others before and after him. Churchill had utilized the Mad Mullah sobriquet to describe Britain's Pashtun opponents in Malakand. How could anyone who resisted the benevolent and well meaning empire be anything but mad? Mohammed Abdullah Hassan is regarded today as the founding father of the Somali state. His wife and other women were military commanders as well, a fact that must have shocked the occupiers. Two of the British officers who fought in the Somalian War later served under Churchill in another war. One of them was Hastings Ismai, who served as Churchill's chief military consigliere during the Second World War and was afterwards appointed the first Secretary General of NATO, the creation of the American Empire. Initially, he was reluctant, seeing the outfit as designer made to keep the Soviet Union out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. Churchill persuaded him to accept the position. Ismai, always a loyal member of the top echelons of the politico military imperial bureaucracy, fell into line and accepted hard facts. Britain's global responsibilities had to be handed over to Washington. There was no other form of dissolution. Churchill would have his chance to fight in Africa after all, but first the context. In Sudan, the proto nationalists who began contesting outside rule in the late 1800s were led by a religious leader, Mohammed Ahmed bin Abdullah, who referred to himself as the Mahdi, the savior, whose arrival had been predicted in Shiite Islam. For mainstream Sunnis, the very idea constituted heresy, since there could be no other prophet except the prophet. Mohammed Ahmed had started the Sudanese war by attempting to wrest the country away from Egyptian and Ottoman control. In order to do so, he needed a title that would trump the Sultan Caliph in Istanbul and his underlings in the region. His army of volunteers accepted him as the Mahdi. Contrary to British accounts describing his fierce fighting force as crazed dervishes blinded by prejudice, the Mahdi was not a literalist like the anti-Ottoman Wahhabis in the Arab Peninsula. He was a reformer who wanted changes in the religion, a proponent of social justice who castigated local and Egyptian notables for collaborating first with the Ottomans and later, from around 1882, the British. The Sudanese War was a major event in imperialist politics. Britain was divided. The Prime Minister, W.E. Gladstone, was not keen on war and in 1884 dispatched General Charles Gordon, a former imperial consul in Egypt, to evacuate Egyptian and British troops from Khartoum. Gordon settled in, contrary to his orders, and was besieged. In an exchange of letters with the Mahdi, he insisted that God is on our side. The Mahdi offered safe passage to the general and his soldiers. They would not be harmed if they left the city peacefully. Gordon, in his imperial arrogance, rejected the offer. Gladstone was not convinced that an army should be sent to try to relieve the general, but he caved in under pressure. The expedition did not succeed, and in 1885 Gordon was martyred by the Mahdi's soldiers when they took Khartoum.